Everybody, welcome to What the Flick. Finally, a transparent recap on this show. We're long overdue, my apologies. Alonso Duralde joining us from Pop Trigger and Murder is Fun. Is that, sorry?
I mean, that'd
Murder
be a
with,
great
Murder with
title,
Friends,
but it's
sorry.
Murder with Friends.
Murder with
Murder
Friends,
is
Grace
fun.
Baldridge.
I feel like my parents would be less inclined to tune in if I had just called it Murder is Fun. They'd be like, Grace, we love you, but that is a step too far.
Acid is groovy, whatever it's called. Sorry. Grace Baldridge and my good friend Andrea James, filmmaker, activist, journalist. Thank you for joining us today to talk about this. No, we're excited. Wow. Okay, this show, man. You know, if there's an overview or if there's an arc for this season, I want to say that it's Maura's body. Like we're sort of asked to contemplate that more than usual, just in terms of the actual mechanics of the surgeries and what are the hormones doing to her body and the shaping garments and all that stuff. What did y'all that to me seemed like?
And also, I think her age came into play for the first time because I hadn't really considered it before, but for the first time we're seeing that she has health risks or she has, you know. Do we ever know what the heart doodah, as she calls it, is? It's a heart attack?
They said like something had popped up on an EKG or something.
Right.
So it could be like a murmur or, you know, an irregular, an arrhythmia, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's a general thing that after a certain age, any surgery is always risky.
Yeah, but her health is definitely a topic of discussion for the whole family. And I think all the characters seem to sort of contemplate their morality and what does life mean.
Their mortality.
They're both actually. Both.
The Pfeffermans don't have a lot of morality, I don't think.
Said. Yeah, their mortality. There you go. I went to college. So I think you see that as far as like religion and spirituality as well. So I think a lot of very heavy thematic elements came into play. And I told Alonso that I sort of fell off after season 2 a little bit. And he said, would you like to cover season 3? I was like, maybe. And I'm really happy you asked me to because I have been thinking a lot about my life since I finished.
Yeah, I mean, they really try to hit on some big themes. And I do think that there's a corporeal aspect to Maura's transition that we haven't seen previously. That's important because I always look at this show as a bit of a time capsule, and Maura represents kind of the end of an era of a certain kind of trans person. There will never be trans people in these numbers transitioning at that age ever again. It's going to be like being gay or lesbian. People used to come out after a failed marriage and you know, gnashing of teeth and sadness. But
or
now
scandal.
Right. And now they come out in middle school. And so that's happening with trans people as well. So Maura's problems, especially these physiological things, are great to capture on film because it's kind of a moment that's passing.
Interesting. I also like the idea of the terminology that gets thrown around, the outdated stuff. Like I hadn't heard anybody say sex change operation in a long time.
Oh yeah.
That was so like, oh yeah, that's a golden oldie, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and although I had never heard the term gender confirmation surgery until the last couple of years, I was like, that's so good. That is so like that nails it so interestingly.
Yeah, well, anytime a community's finding their voice, you know, they call it a euphemism treadmill. That over time, you know, words get refined and language gets sort of codified around certain things. So I love that change.
And a specificity obviously comes into play as well. But oh god, the fucking Pfeffermans, they make me crazy. And it gets to the point where anybody who falls in love with one of them, it's like the final girl. You just think, don't go in the cabin, you know, don't
so
get into that
accurate.
relationship.
And especially romantically this season, there were so many different pairings that I found myself rooting for initially and then cringing towards the end just because you know that the Pfeffermans are not great at sustaining healthy romantic relationships. And that sucked because there were so many characters. I was Sherry Jones. Yes, I love her.
You know she's doomed.
And you know she's doomed. You know that and part of me was like, you're smarter than this. Come on, can't you see that this is not a great relationship? But I love Gabby Hoffman's character, even though
much.
I thought that I would dislike her after the first and second season. I've actually really grown to find her a very sympathetic and a very well-rounded character. And then this was the one season also that I started to like Joshua, even though he really is terrible at romantic relationships. Just truly terrible.
And parenting.
Yes. Oh God, he does so many things badly, but I still find myself wanting to hug him.
Well, you know, I think part of all the Josh backstory with what's the woman who dies with Rita, like there's so much emotional stunting there that it's still going off in his life, and the way that he doesn't really quite get how to relate to people and how to be an adult and all that stuff, and that goes back to the parents, I think, so it's not like he's evil or you blame him, but at the same time you're just like, oh God, don't say that thing. Don't.
But I like how they use Colton as sort of a foil for Joshua,
Yes.
even though he's younger than him and he actually has even less sort of formal parenting in his life. Colton is a way better
Stable,
person, more stable person. And so I like that you see this dynamic between the two of them who are so connected but so different at the same time. And it really highlights Josh's flaws, but also I think it causes him to have to look at himself in the mirror. Like, this is who I am, have to face sort of some of his demons.
Well, one of the really interesting things about season 2 was how much they explored trauma and how we carry that with us, possibly even generationally. And so I think that gave us a lot more empathy for characters like Josh, who do seem unlikable, as Jill said. She said she's been pitching unlikable characters for years. And she says that sort of means code for people that straight white males don't like. But I'm not sure I buy that necessarily, but that's what she is.
No, I mean, yeah, they're definitely they're complicated and they're messy, and yeah, that I think makes them all the more human. I mean, the road trip with the stripper, it just like there's just stuff coming out of his mouth. You're like,
well, and
you said it now.
That was a very big scene for a lot of trans people who I've talked to who've seen it, because that's the closest to the dating experience that most of us have had.
Really?
It's very difficult to date when trans, as you might imagine, and those kinds of questions and just kind of the jadedness and world weariness of Shay's character, Shay, is just really resonated with me.
Well, and I think definitely because you sense that moment where she's willing to allow herself to be vulnerable with this guy, only to very quickly regret that, and that I think is an ongoing sort of Pfefferman response, where it's like, somebody opens up, somebody allows themselves to be vulnerable and to go to that sort of safe relationship place, and then something terrible happens.
And that was another sort of safe relationship place that I was initially rooting for. I was like, I wouldn't have imagined, Shay and Josh, but actually I'm like the first half of that episode, I was like, this is kind of interesting. I think this could be a good dynamic. And then I just expected better from him in this episode. And to me, it sort of played out because I thought it was so well acted. It played out almost like a short film.
I think it was one of the best
totally
acted scenes in the entire season.
That episode really stood out for me just because of they had an amazing chemistry, and then just the writing of it, the words that he said, the specific words that he said, and you saw how it really affected Shay, was just really haunting. And I couldn't get back around to really liking Josh again. So I went from wanting to hug him, and then after that episode, like, come, you should know better. Like, I wanted better from you, and I thought that this was going to be a little bit more of a journey, and I thought that Shay was, revealing things to you about yourself. I don't know. But then I think I was giving him too much credit. I think he's a little bit too narcissistic to be selfless. I don't know.
They're all on a journey. They're
all on a journey.
These characters. Now, speaking of standalone episodes, what did you guys think about the Flashback episode, the childhoods of Shelley and of what was Maura's previous? Mort. Yeah. Particularly the revelation regarding Shelley having been sexually abused by a teacher. Do we think that explains anything? Does that feel of a piece with what we've come to know about her? Is it revelatory, or is it just? I think that's the kind of revelation that in drama can sometimes feel like a shorthand. Not that in reality it's not a huge, giant traumatic event, but I think sometimes when writers implement it, it's not always as skillful as it could be. And I think by the end of the season, I came around to thinking that it was relevant to her, but I just wondered what your takeaway from it was.
Well, personally, I felt like they finally gave Judith Light's character, and that actress the chance to shine in the way that she can. I mean, the story arc and the revelation was great, and the moment when she says, "I always find myself in relationships with men with secrets," that was amazing to me, because then you start to see where she was coming from in previous seasons, but then it really set us up for the finale, which was so great.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this season the standout character for me was Shelley, and I didn't realize that I missed knowing more about this character until they revealed more, and I realized that I had been missing that in previous seasons. And a lot of times in season 1, season 2, she was sort of the comic relief.
Yeah, when she says you roll your eyes at me, you dismiss me, I thought, is this a note from the writers' room? Because the show kind of did that to her for a while too.
And I thought this was really great. And I think, but as far as that flashback episode, to me it was fine, but it only really resonated with the finale. Pairing it with the finale, then it totally made sense. But on its own, it wasn't the standout episode for me. As I said, I thought that was Shay and Josh's episode. I thought that was the best episode of the season. But paired with the finale, I think it does bring everything sort of full circle with who this character is. And she really had maybe the most interesting arc of all the characters, because her relationship with Buzz,
I was cheering when she finally, listened to what people had been hinting at and took it to heart.
But those first hints about who Buzz was, or who Buzz is, Buzz just sounds like the name of a children's book, but were just really hard to watch because, I don't know if you guys know anyone who's been sort of in a similar situation. I know I've had aunts who are a little bit older who will get in relationships with really kind men that are, sort of taking advantage of them. So that was an arc for me that was just sort of difficult to watch because it was so sweet in its own way, and
and Richard Mazur is always so kind of cuddly.
He did a great job.
Nice.
Those cargo shorts, he wore them well.
Although actually, it's funny. He was. I don't know if anybody remembers this. There was a great '70s TV movie. Fallen Angel, I think it was called, where again he was playing off the kind, cuddly Richard Mazur type, and he was a child pornographer. So that was pretty disturbing at the time. I think my letdown with the flashback episode was that I thought that the Weimar stuff in season 2 was so strong and so interesting, and all the Magnus Hirschfeld and the kind of rise of the Third Reich stuff was interesting, especially because it took a while to figure out how does this connect exactly to everything else, and then once it all comes together, it was fascinating, and so this one it felt like, well, we're going to give you a drop of this, we're going to give you, but it didn't have the same kind of punch, I thought.
I agree. I think it didn't work quite as well as that did, but it felt. All of these moments where there's flashback feel like they're trying to unmoor it from how specific it is. I feel like. I've said this elsewhere, that I'm not sure this show is going to age well because it's such a time capsule of this exact moment.
Well, sure, yeah.
And I think doing these flashbacks is their attempt to try to unmoor the show from its exact moment.
Yeah, I also think that this is a difficult show to get invested in if you haven't already. It was hard because you become this family is very just so close-knit and sometimes inaccessible. When I was watching with my girlfriend and she would come in for an episode and she's like, I don't like, these people aren't very nice. They're not being nice to their mother. They're not being respectful. I don't really like this. And it's hard to bring people in. So I thought that the second season did a good job of adding sort of a larger historical element, and there was a little bit more of a through line. But this third season, I don't think that the flashback episode did quite enough to explain enough about this family so that someone who wasn't already a fan of the show would care,
Well, I kind of feel the paradigm for a lot of these streaming shows is that they are, and really I think even a lot of, if you go back to shows like Sopranos or Breaking Bad, they're really not designed for you to hop in the middle. Like you are expected to treat this as a saga, that you got to start at the beginning and get all the way through. And so I don't think they're thinking of it in that way, that it's a show like, I don't know, Malcolm in the Middle or something, where somebody can just tune in randomly and start and pick up at that point. Like you really have to know where these folks are coming from. I loved the relationship with Angelica Houston and that character's qualms about where things were going.
I think it's Vicky, right?
Vicky, yes. The scenes with her and Bryna, the scene early on, the whole segment early on with Moira losing her bearings in the swap meet mall, I thought was really powerfully done. We haven't talked about Sarah at all.
Yeah, well, she had quite an arc with her S&M and all of her drama.
Yeah, and she is, I'm trying to, she's that is a valise waiting to be unpacked. But she seems to be constantly creating these sort of mini dramas for herself to not deal with the larger stuff. So it's like whether it's the putting together the events at the school with the rabbi, or her relationship with Len. She seems to be constantly sort of, her meltdown about the turtle. I think she's very much about the sort of these like creating all this sort of nuttiness in the immediate moment to not have to deal with. There's a lot of stuff I think that's untapped with her.
And I think that we sort of came into this season with there being a lot of stuff that is untapped with her, and we're leaving this season with there still being even more stuff that is untapped with her. I think that where Shelley had the biggest arc and really a big character transformation
And
this
a payoff.
season, and a payoff, Sarah, there hasn't really been much of a payoff for her. And the reason why I got invested in Transparent in the first place was because of the lesbian story arc, because there's just so little of that I was very excited.
Season 2 was super lesbian. I mean, like which I think is interesting. But it's funny because the other thing that I've been talking with people about this show is that like while it puts forth a lot of queer subject matter and terminology and things that actually are discussed in the LGBT community, it's also, I think, the most Jewish show ever.
By far.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like, like Jewish comedy, I think since World War II has been a prevailing thing, in sitcoms and stand-up, whatever. But the actual sort of mechanics of, observed Judaism and the rituals and the holidays and has never been as played up, I think, as strongly as on this show.
And the importance that it plays within a family, even though I wouldn't really characterize the Pfeffermans as particularly, as a whole, particularly religious, they find community in their religion, if that makes sense. And I like that that's sort of consistent from season 1 into season 3. But I just want to talk about Sarah a little bit more.
Oh, yes, sorry.
I really did fall a little bit in love with her in season 1. And I can't believe that they're sort of setting this up for her to get back with Len. Were you guys surprised at that?
To me, it seems like it's a path of least resistance kind of
I think
option.
no one else was surprised by that except me.
Well, and I've found her sadomasochism of confronting this younger lover that he has to be just so cringy. I was like, oh, really? You're going to go to this?
I know.
The spin class. Yeah, no, I think that if she does get back together with Len, it's not because he's the great love of her life. It's because it's easy.
They were so miserable in season. I want to almost play that back and show it to her. Remember this?
Yeah, no, so believe me.
Remember Tammy?
If they get back together, it's not going to be presented as, oh, yay, she fixed everything. It's like, it's going to be like, oh, shit, she got back together with Len. Like, that's bring on more heartbreak for everybody involved in that family, the children included.
Speaking of heartbreak, what do you think about the rabbis?
Oh, man.
She was the other character in this season besides Shell who really just broke my heart.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Her struggle with her faith, her finally acknowledging that this miscarriage gutted her. That's.
And wanting to pursue this relationship, but having it be, even though it's manifested as Sarah, but like it's really it's the relationship with Josh is still sort of the thing on her shoulder that she can't get rid of, to be able to move on and find the next person. Yeah, no, Catherine Hahn totally nailed it this season. It was so great. Yeah, we have to wrap it. I'm trying to think what else is.
Well, what do you think we can look for in season 4? Do you think there will definitely be a season 4?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's been announced, right?
Yeah. I think Jill has a plan to do at least a couple more years.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. I think and there's a certain pragmatism to the knowledge of Maura not being able to go further in an aesthetic way, in an appearance way, because Jeffrey Tambor is still playing the role. But I think they used that hindrance as something interesting for the character, that like Maura wants to have these surgeries done and continue on these hormones and stuff, but is not allowed to pursue that path. So now she has to. I'm trying to think.
It's a dream deferred.
It's a dream deferred, but she has to continue with the transition that's going to happen for her internally, whether or not whatever she gets to show to the world.
Right.
I guess.
And gender transition is mostly social anyway. It's not a physical thing. The physical part is a small part of it. So that's interesting. And maybe we should close with the issue of transcasting, which
yes.
has been very interesting. It's so complicated, and I've written about this in The Atlantic and other places, that a show like this wouldn't have gotten made had Jeffrey Tambor not been involved, and his talent makes this show so great. So it's important that he's been there, but it also, I think, is part of the reason this show is going to feel very of its moment, because I think in the future, it will probably be looked at like Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, which at the time was controversial within the gay community.
But again, he got that movie made.
Right,
You know?
and so it's that tricky thing. It's like more people learned about AIDS and were empathetic to gay people because of Tom Hanks, in the way that I think Jeffrey Tambor is doing for this show.
Yeah, and I loved his speech at the Emmys where he said, "I hope I'm the last cisgender male to play a trans woman," you know. And for the people who've complained about that, I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement that this show has hired so many trans people on both sides of the camera, up and down the call sheet on this show. I mean, what I was telling Andrew, I was thrilled to have her here, but also because she's one of the few trans people I know who isn't working on Transparent.
Well, I was supposed to do something with them this season, but I was in Australia, so I wasn't able to join.
I know, if we don't get you back next season, that's why, because you were on the show. So, but anyway, thank you for coming in. It was just great to have your input. And Grace, I'm glad you hopped back on the wagon. And
Yes, I'm back.
Yes.
Back in
Stick
full
with
force.
for season 4. Here we come.
All right, so season 4, some of us will be back. I don't know who, but join us then. Thanks for watching.